In the freezing black of night at a desolate bus stop, a young white woman holds her newborn daughter in helpless silence. Abandoned by her family, ignored by the world, and with nowhere left to turn, hope feels out of reach. But just as despair begins to settle in, an old pickup truck pulls up and a mysterious elderly woman steps out. When the truck door opens, the beginning of a whole new, better life is waiting to welcome them in. Before we dive in this story, do you remember the most recent time your whole family got together? Let's comment below. The snow in Juneau, Alaska, didn't fall so much as it devoured. It howled through the skeletal trees, blanketed roads until they disappeared, and pressed in on the world like a judgment. At a lonely bus stop on the edge of the city, under a flickering orange streetlight, stood Rainey Thompson, 18, exhausted, pale-faced and freckled, her skin reddened by the Alaskan cold, and holding a life that depended entirely on her. The baby in her arms, Zuri, barely 3 months old, whimpered against her chest, her cries thin from cold and fatigue. Rainey wrapped her tighter in the frayed fleece blanket she'd managed to grab before the door slammed shut behind her for the last time. The wind was picking up, sharp and persistent, cutting through her thin coat. Her fingers clutching the cold bottle stung with early numbness. "Shh, baby girl," she whispered through chattering teeth. I know. Mama's trying." Her voice cracked, hoarse and dry. She hadn't cried until now, but the tears came hot and fast, only to freeze on her cheeks moments later. 30 minutes earlier, she'd been standing on her parents' porch, staring at the only home she'd ever known. They were a picture-perfect white Christian family, clean-cut, conservative, proud of their lineage. Her pregnancy didn't just break their rules, it shattered their illusion. His words sharper than the slap he didn't bother delivering. Her mother stood behind him, arms crossed, eyes filled with something that looked like guilt, but not enough to act on. Not enough to stop it. Not enough to say, "I'm sorry," not even goodbye. They didn't care that Zuri was flesh of her flesh, that Raina had made honor roll, had dreams of becoming a scientist. All of that vanished the moment her belly grew and her pregnancy, in their hyper-religious, conservative community, became a symbol of shame. She'd tried her best to hide it for months. Wore baggy clothes, kept to herself, smiled when people stared, but when the truth came out, it wasn't the scandal that destroyed her future. It was their response to it. Give her up for adoption, or get out, they said. She chose her child. But now, standing in the dark, her shoes soaked through, and her toes burning from frostbite, she tried not to think about. That choice felt unbearable. Her best friend couldn't take her in. Her parents were uncomfortable with the idea of a teen mom staying under their roof. The baby's father, a boy just like her. White, middle class, and scared out of his mind. Said it was a mistake he wasn't ready to deal with. His last text read, "Don't ruin my life with this." She hadn't replied. The bus hadn't come. Probably wouldn't. It was too late, too cold, too hopeless. Every breath Raina took stung like broken glass in her chest. She looked down at Zuri's little face, flushed red, eyes fluttering between wakefulness and something worse, something silent. No, she thought, stay awake, please stay awake. Then, like headlights from a salvation she hadn't dared to hope for, a battered old pickup truck rumbled toward her through the snow. It slowed, tires crunching against the ice-packed ground. The window rolled down with a mechanical groan. Behind it sat an elderly black woman with wild silver curls stuffed beneath a knit cap and eyes like cut steel. Her voice cracked the air like a whip. "You two look like you're about to get swallowed whole." Raina tensed. She'd had enough of looks, enough of people seeing her and her baby and deciding she didn't belong. But the woman's voice softened, just a notch, at the sound of Zuri's faint cry. "They say the storm's hitting by dawn. Tomps'll drop fast. I don't bite, but the cold will if we don't move." Still, Raina hesitated. The truck was old, dented, paint peeling. The bed was covered in a lumpy tarp, like it was hiding something. The woman wasn't smiling, wasn't pleading, just waiting. She could be dangerous, Raina thought. Then again, so was the cold. Maybe more. The woman leaned out slightly, her breath fogging the air. "Cabin's 20 miles out, but I've got chains on the tires and know this road like my own bones." Storm's coming and the night's already too cold. She won't last till morning if you stay out." It was the way she said "your baby" that cut through everything, firm, matter-of-fact, without judgment. Raina glanced down at Zuri's face, then back up. She was 17, terrified and freezing, but she wasn't reckless. With aching legs, she trudged through the snow toward the passenger door. When she opened it, a wave of warmth washed over her. Inside was strange. Crystals dangled from the rearview mirror, the dash cluttered with tiny figurines, old photographs, and dried herbs. But it was warm. It smelled like pine and something earthy, something real. Raina climbed in, clutching Zuri like a lifeline. Ellery didn't look at her, just threw the truck into gear and muttered, "Close the door, girl. Can't heat all of Alaska." The road disappeared behind them as the truck rumbled into the forest, tires crunching over patchy ice and early snow. The beams of the headlights swept through low-hanging mist, not yet thick enough to blind. Raina sat stiff in the passenger seat, her arms wrapped protectively around Zuri, who had finally fallen asleep, her tiny face pressed against her mother's chest. The warmth inside the truck was almost shocking after the bone-deep cold outside, and Raina's body began to shake, not from the cold anymore, but from the flood of adrenaline finally letting go. She glanced at the driver. Ellery Vaughn. The woman hadn't said much since they left the bus stop. She muttered occasionally to the truck like it was an old friend, but not once had she asked Raina any of the questions most people did. No, how'd you get yourself into this? No judgment hidden behind polite curiosity. Just silence and the sound of the wind hammering the windshield. They turned off the main road, onto what barely qualified as a path, more memory than trail. Trees loomed tall on either side, bending under the weight of snow, as if bowing toward the old pickup that dared to disturb the wilderness. Raina tightened her grip on Zuri. You're not going to hurt us, are you?" she asked, her voice low, edged with fear she couldn't quite hide. Ellery barked a laugh, not unkind, but dry as kindling. "If I wanted to hurt you, I'd have left you out there. Nature would have done the job for me just fine." Then, after a pause, "I don't hurt children, never have, never will." There was something in her tone that rooted deep in Raina's chest. A finality, a history. The kind of sentence someone doesn't say unless it once mattered more than anything. The cabin appeared like a secret between the trees. An A-frame structure tucked under a canopy of white, windows glowing warm against the freezing dark, smoke curled from the stone chimney. It looked impossibly small, but somehow alive. Ellery killed the engine. Home sweet home. Getting from the truck to the cabin was its own trial. The snow was thigh-deep in places, and Ellery, surprisingly nimble for her age, trudged ahead, carving a path without complaint. Raina followed, half carrying Zuri, feet numb and lungs burning by the time they reached the wooden porch. Ellery shoved the door open, and heat spilled out like a miracle. The inside was nothing like Raina expected. It was bigger than it looked, and stranger. Every inch of wall space was filled, shelves overflowing with books in languages she didn't recognize, bundles of dried herbs hanging from the rafters, maps, specimens, bones, crystals, and a massive work table littered with magnifying glasses, geological tools, and labeled jars. The whole place felt like a hybrid between a science lab and a witch's den, chaotic but precise, like a mind too big for neat category. "Close your mouth, girl, you'll catch flies," Ellery said, hanging her coat on a hook and stoking the fire roaring in the center wood stove. Raina stayed frozen at the threshold. She glanced around, no signs of weapons, just herbs and books. Still, every cell in her body screamed caution. But Zuri let out a weak cry, and that made the decision for her. She stepped in. Without a word, Ellery disappeared into what must have been the kitchen, returning minutes later with a bottle of warm formula. Raina stared. "How did you—" "Figured that's what she'd need," Ellery said, handing it over like it was the most natural thing in the world. "Been a while, but some things you don't forget." Raina fed her daughter, hands still trembling. She wanted to ask more, but Ellery was already back, carrying a wooden drawer lined with blankets. She set it gently by the stove. "Makeshift crib. Solid sides make 'em feel safe." Raina stared at her. "How do you know so much about babies?" Ellery's eyes flickered just for a moment before she shrugged. known plenty of beginnings and a few endings. The silence that followed was full of things not said. Rayanne didn't press, she was too tired, too grateful. "You smell like you've fought a bear," Ellery added, nodding toward the back. "Bathroom's through there. Water's hot if you're quick, generator's old." Raina hesitated. She didn't want to leave Zuri, not even for a minute. Ellery must have read her mind. "I can hold her. She's safe with me." There was no reason to trust her, no proof. But something in the woman's hands, the way she touched things gently, with reverence, made it feel less like a risk and more like a reprieve. Raina whispered, "Her name's Zuri." Ellery smiled for the first time. "Zuri. That's a strong name. Hello there, little wildflower." The shower was heaven. Hot water and soap felt like magic, like being allowed to shed the worst day of your life. When she returned, wrapped in an oversized shirt and flannel pants that didn't fit but felt like clouds, Raina found Ellery singing softly to Zuri. It was some folk song Raina didn't know, about mountains and rivers and time. Zuri had fallen asleep in the woman's arms, peaceful in a way Raina hadn't seen in weeks. "There's food on the table," Ellery said without looking up. "Nothing fancy, soup and bread." It tasted better than anything Raina could remember. She ate slowly, watching the fire, listening to the wind claw at the walls outside. When she was done, she looked around again. Her eyes landed on a blue-painted door, slightly chipped, with a small hand-lettered sign nailed to it. "EMVV, do not enter." "Who's EMV?" she asked before she could stop herself. Ellery didn't answer at first, just tucked the blanket tighter around Zuri. Then, without turning, she said, "No one you need to worry about." Her voice had changed, flat, final. Rainey understood. The question was over. "You'll sleep there," Ellery said, pointing to a daybed in the corner. "I'm through that door. I sleep light, so don't try anything stupid. And don't thank me yet. You haven't seen how weird this place gets." Later, after Ellery had turned in and the fire glowed low, Raina lay under a quilt that smelled faintly of pine and tobacco, listening to the storm rage outside. Zuri breathed evenly beside her in the draw crib, and for the first time in days, Raina's shoulders dropped from her ears. She didn't know what tomorrow held. She didn't know who Ellery really was, or what secrets lived behind that blue door. But right now they were warm, they were alive, and that, in the middle of the Alaskan dark, was enough. Morning came slow and gray, barely a whisper through the frost-fogged windows. Raina woke to the creak of floorboards and the smell of something warm, oats and cinnamon maybe, or whatever passed for breakfast in a cabin that looked like it belonged in both a science museum and a fairy tale. Zuri stirred beside her in the drawer crib, blinking up with those deep, dark eyes like the world had never hurt her. Raina kissed her forehead, heart swelling with something heavy and strange. Gratitude, confusion, fear. She wasn't used to kindness without cost. Ellery was already at the stove, her silver hair tied back in a low, messy knot, humming low and tuneless as she stirred a pot. She glanced up when Raina padded over in the two big flannel pants and socks that slid halfway off her heels. "You're up. Good. You can earn your keep." She handed Raina a broom with zero ceremony. "I'm not running a damn hotel." Raina blinked, then gave a tired half-smile. "I thought maybe you were a fairy godmother." Ellery snorted. "I'm allergic to tools, sweep." And so it began. The days blurred into one another like snow drifting over a road that used to have lines. Outside, the storm didn't let up. Wind screamed through the trees, and the world stayed locked in ice. But inside the cabin there was structure, rhythm, even purpose. Ellery had rules. Chores in the morning, meals at regular times, quiet during her writing hours, and under no circumstances was the blue door to be opened. She didn't shout, didn't scold, just looked at you like you were wasting her time. And somehow that was worse. But she taught. God, she taught. She showed Raina how to split firewood and which types of wood burned slow and hot versus fast and wild. She explained how to stock the stove without suffocating the flame, how to boil water even if the power failed, how to make tea from wild herbs that could ease fever or soothe a baby's stomach. Everything Ellery did seemed woven with knowledge, deep, lived-in wisdom that came not from books, but from doing. And Raina, to her surprise, learned fast. Zuri flourished in the warmth and quiet of the cabin. She started smiling more, cooing at shadows on the wall, tracking movement with sharp curiosity. Ellery claimed it wasn't gas. She knows her person. That's you. She's responding to recognition. Raina began to believe it. She spent her evenings curled in the armchair by the fire, feeding Zuri or folding laundry, while Ellery scribbled in thick leather-bound journals with a fountain pen that looked older than both of them combined. One night, curiosity got the better of her. "Are those your research notes?" Ellery didn't look up. "Some of them, observations, field data, climate records." "You're a scientist?" Was, she underlined something with a thick slash. "Professor of Arctic Biology, University of Fairbanks, retired early." "Well," now Ellery looked up, her gaze sharp but not unkind. "Because the suits wanted grant money and headlines. I wanted truth." She tapped her pen on the journal like a heartbeat. "Changes that should take centuries are happening in decades. I've been documenting it for 30 years. Nobody listened back then. Now they're panicking." She turned the page. "Too late, maybe." The words hit Raina harder than she expected. There was something tragic in them, not just the science, but the woman behind them. Like she'd once been part of something greater, only to be cast out for refusing to compromise. That night, as the wind howled and the walls creaked like old bones, Raina lay in bed staring at the ceiling, Zuri asleep beside her. She thought of her parents' faces when they'd told her to leave, the way her mother had looked away, the shame in her father's voice, not at what they'd done, but at what she was, no daughter of mine. And yet here she was, in a stranger's home, being treated with more dignity than her own blood had ever offered. Maybe that was the lesson the cold had come to teach her. Not how to survive, but who would show up when the world fell away. By the 5th day, Raina wasn't just surviving, she was becoming something else entirely. Stronger, sharper, less afraid, and still the blue door remained closed, the one untouched mystery in a house built on knowing. But that silence, it was beginning to hum. It happened on the 7th night, long after the fire had burned low and the cabin had gone quiet, save for the soft ticking of the old clock on the wall and the wind clawing at the windows like it was trying to get in. Zuri slept soundly in her drawer crib, her breathing rhythmic, tiny hands curled into fists against the blanket. Raina had just returned from checking the fire one last time when she noticed it. Ellery's bedroom door was slightly ajar. That was unusual. Ellery never left it open, not even a crack. And across the room, the blue door still stood silent and closed, but something about it felt different tonight. Charged, like it was watching her. She knew she shouldn't, knew the boundaries had been made clear from the beginning, but curiosity had weight, and tonight it pressed harder than ever. She crept quietly across the creaky wooden floor, pausing every few steps to listen. Nothing stirred. Her breath was shallow. Her hand trembled as she reached out and touched the cool brass knob. It wasn't locked. The door opened with a soft groan, revealing a room sealed in time, yellow walls hand-painted with faded forest animals. A wooden crib, dusted but intact, stood in the center like an altar. A rocking chair sat in the corner, an Afghan draped across its back. The shelves were lined with children's books, their spines softened by age. Everything was pristine, preserved, untouched and yet deeply lived in. But it was the photographs that stole her breath. Silver frames lined a small dresser, pictures of Ellery, decades younger, holding a baby swaddled in a pale blue blanket. The woman in the photo looked different. Brighter, undone in the way only new mothers can be. Joy radiated from her eyes. Real, raw, infinite. Raina felt something tighten in her throat. She turned toward the door, guilt already rising in her chest, and froze. Ellery was standing there. She didn't speak, just looked at her, expression unreadable, her eyes two shards of winter sky. The silence stretched long and taut, filled with the weight of too many memories. "I'm sorry," Raina whispered. I shouldn't have. Ellery raised a hand, not angry, just tired. It's done now. She stepped into the room, not like a woman reclaiming her space, but like someone entering a sanctuary. Her fingers brushed the crib rail, straightened a stuffed bear, adjusted the Afghan with a tenderness that made Rainier's chest ache. You had a daughter, Raina said softly. Ellery nodded. Eleanor. Born July 14, 1986, 7 pounds exactly, 3 hours of labor. Her voice was hollow, measured, like reading from a textbook to keep from drowning. She had my eyes, but her father's mouth, not that he ever saw it. What happened? Raina asked, not sure if she had the right. Ellery sat down in the rocking chair and held one of the framed photos in her lap. We had 3 beautiful years. I took a quieter teaching job. We lived in town during the week, came here on weekends. She was smart. So damn smart. Knew the names of birds before she could write. Talked to the trees like they were friends. Her voice cracked. The winter she turned 3, we came here for Christmas, just like always. A storm hit, she caught a cough, nothing major at first. I gave her tea, kept her warm, but it got worse, fast. By the time I realized it was more than a cold, the roads were gone, power was out, phone lines dead. I wrapped her up and tried to drive out. We didn't make it. She didn't cry. She didn't need to. Her silence was sharper than any sob. I sang to her until her breath stilled. I thought it was just a fever, like before. I thought I could fix it. Raina's hand went to her mouth. She felt the breath leave her body. She thought of Zuri. Tiny, defenseless, warm in the same crib now. She couldn't imagine it. Didn't want to. It wasn't your fault, Raina whispered. I thought I could do it all alone, Ellery replied. Thought I was proving something. Instead, I buried her. The room was still again, the kind of still that settles deep in your bones. I haven't let anyone in here since, she added. Until now. I didn't mean to pry, Raina said, stepping back. I felt something. Ellery looked up at her, and for the first time the ice in her eyes cracked. Maybe she sent you. They didn't speak after that. They didn't need to. Ellery stood, set the photograph back in its place, and gently closed the door behind them. That night, as Raina fed Zuri beside the fire, Ellery sat in silence, watching the flames. And for the first time Raina understood the woman who had saved her. Not a recluse, not just a scientist, but a mother, who had once lost everything and still found the strength to open her door again. The storm broke on the 10th day, not with ceremony but with quiet, like the wind had grown tired of screaming. Morning light filtered through the windows in slanted gold, touching everything with warmth that felt almost fragile, as if the world outside had finally exhaled. The snow still blanketed the landscape, thick and unforgiving, but the air held a softness, a suggestion of change. Inside the cabin, Renee woke to a silence that was no longer suffocating, but full of possibility. Ellery was already up, crouched beside the wood stove with a journal open on her knee, sketching something with rapid precision. "Storm's done," she said, without looking up. "Thomas used to be one of my field assistants. Smart man. Lost his wife last winter. Brings what I can't grow or find." Thomas. Raina remembered the name from passing mentions. A man who brought things Ellery couldn't gather on her own. A man she trusted, which meant something. Raina shifted Zuri in her arms and sat near the fire, watching her daughter bat at the air, making the tiniest sounds like she was trying to speak the language of light. Later that afternoon, as the sun climbed higher and the world dripped with slow thaw, the distant drone of a snow machine grew louder until it finally broke into view through the trees. Thomas arrived in layers of heavy winter gear, tall and quiet, with the kind of calm that belonged to someone who'd spent his life respecting wild places. Native Alaskan, maybe late 40s or early 50s, with kind eyes and strong hands, he greeted Ellery with a nod and Raina with a curious glance, but no questions. "You the girl Ellery mentioned," he said, his voice low and steady. "The one with the baby?" Raina stiffened instinctively, ready for judgment, but he just smiled and reached into his pack. My wife sent this." He pulled out a small stuffed polar bear, worn but clean. She said no baby should go without something soft to hold. Raina blinked. The gift was simple, but it undid her more than she expected. "Thank you," she managed, her throat tight. They unloaded supplies, while Ellery and Thomas moved around each other with an ease that spoke of old friendship, no wasted movements, no need for words. Later, over mugs of black coffee that Ellery declared almost drinkable, Thomas shared updates, roads reopening, community shelters closing, the worst of the cold behind them. Then, almost casually, he added, "Ran into someone in town yesterday, couple, early 60s, said they were looking for their daughter, about 17, baby named Zuri." Raina froze. Thomas looked at her gently. "Sound familiar?" Her heart thudded in her chest, too loud, too fast. "My parents," she whispered. Ellery said nothing, her face unreadable. "They said they made a mistake, been searching for you since that storm hit, thought you might have, you know." He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't have to. Raina stood slowly, eyes on the floor. "They cast me out like I was filth," she said through clenched teeth. "Now they want a second chance just because I survived?" Thomas nodded. "Didn't think you would, but they're in town, at the church, left this." He handed her a folded note. The handwriting was unmistakably her mother's, neat, careful, desperate. Raina didn't open it. She just held it like it might burn. That night, after Zuri fell asleep, Raina stood by the fire, staring into the flames. "They threw me out," she said quietly. "Told me I wasn't their daughter anymore. Said I was a stain on their faith." Her voice broke. "Now they want to pretend it didn't happen." Ellery didn't interrupt. She just listened. "I don't know if I can forgive that," Raina whispered. "I don't know if I should." Hendry moved closer, her presence a kind of anchor. "You don't owe them anything," she said, "but sometimes people change, not because they're good, but because losing something makes them realize what mattered." Raina didn't reply. She didn't need to. Later, when the fire had dimmed and the night wrapped around the cabin again, she sat beside Zuri's crib, unfolding the note slowly. Inside were only 2 sentences, written in trembling script. "We were wrong. We want to know our granddaughter if you'll let us." She sat in silence for a long time, staring at those words, the ink smudged slightly like tears had touched it. And in that moment, Raina realized something deep in her bones. Forgiveness wasn't a gift for them. It was a choice. For herself. But it would be on her terms. Spring didn't arrive in the mountains with fanfare. It came in quietly, like it was asking permission to stay. The snow melted in patches, revealing stubborn grass and muddy paths, and the sun lingered just a little longer each day. Inside the cabin, things shifted too. Raina had stayed longer than she ever imagined. What began as a desperate escape had transformed into something resembling a life. With Ellery she'd found rhythm, knowledge, and a sense of home that didn't demand she shrink herself to fit. But home, she was learning, wasn't just one place. It was the people who showed up, stayed, grew with you. And it was time to build something new. One late March morning, Ellery handed Raina a folded map and a small brass key. "There's a house in Sitka," she said plainly. "Been in my family since the ADS, near the water, 2 bedrooms, decent distance to the university and research centers." She paused, then added, "Could be a good base." Raina stared at the map, then at Ellery. "You're saying we should move?" "I'm saying it's time," Ellery replied, her voice steady. "You need to study. I need access to better labs, and Zuri needs more than trees and my ramblings about lichens." They packed over the next few weeks, not to leave the cabin behind, but to carry its lessons with them. By early May, they'd relocated to Sitka, a small coastal city hugged by ocean and forest, where gulls circled overhead and the scent of salt filled the morning air. The house was modest but warm, the kind of place that felt lived in within days. Raina enrolled in the environmental science program at the university. Ellery found part-time lab work and slowly began integrating her decades of observations into academic archives. Zuri started attending a local child care center, her days filled with new faces, new games, and endless questions. but they never left the past behind. Every weekend, without fail, Raina packed Zuri into the car and drove the few hours back to the valley, to the home where her parents now waited. Not with judgment, but open arms. Her mother always made too much food. Her father always had a new toy or book for Zuri. They had changed, not perfectly, not instantly, but honestly. There was space now for laughter that wasn't forced, space to sit at the same table and be a family again, even if the shape of that family had shifted. On holidays, Thanksgiving, Christmas, Easter, they all came together, Raina, Zuri, Ellery, and her parents. Sometimes Thomas joined, too, bringing fresh bread or smoked fish, stories of the North and quiet wisdom. They ate, told stories, played games on the floor with Zuri giggling in the middle. And when the meals ended and the fire crackled low, Raina would sometimes catch her mother watching Ellery with something like gratitude in her eyes. No words were ever exchanged about it, but they didn't need to be. Raina still studied late into the night. Ellery still muttered to herself while organizing research samples. Zuri still reached for the stars from her bedroom window. But now everything had a center, a life remade, not by forgetting the past, but by choosing who and what to carry forward. Join us to share meaningful stories by hitting the like and subscribe buttons. Don't forget to turn on the notification bell to start your day with profound lessons and heartfelt empathy.